talking about the actual thing that we're supposed to be talking about, and I'm just going to bring the slides back up if I can manage to do that. Here we go. Okay, so what we're talking about today, and again, this is just a relatively sort of little thing that hopefully will be helpful to people, but which also maybe will spark some conversations and things about how we can best do that. And that's just quick and easy sort of service discovery. So this is just a technique that I've used in the past, particularly in the early days of doing digital transformation within the council, just to find out a little bit more about some of the services that are there to be transformed, and to help maybe prioritize them and decide which we do next. And so I wrote about this a bit on the blog. That the link is there with a bit of a link to a template and some quick sort of text describing how best to use that. So how does it help? Well, it provides a bit of a framework to have conversations, and sometimes that's really useful. I think particularly when we're talking to somebody that we've not spoken to before about digital stuff before, perhaps they're a little bit new to it, perhaps we're a bit new to their service area and don't know too much about it. But it's a really great way, I think, to start gently introducing some of the ideas around digital transformation and end-to-end service design, and to start them thinking a bit more positively about it. And as I say, it helps us as well to really understand some of the basics of a service, what some of the different sort of components are and stuff that make up that service, who the users are and what they might need, and how big the opportunity is for us. And then it also really helps us to prioritize the services that we might want to start look at transforming. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So I think there's two times really when this type of approach is really helpful. One is when you've already decided that you're going to be working with a particular service. So you're going to go in and work with a waste people, or you're going to go in and do some stuff with training standards or whatever it might be. So you've decided you're going to be working with these folk, but you need to be able to have that initial kickoff conversation, perhaps with the service manager, to find out a little bit more about them and what they're doing. And it helps everybody to focus both on the user needs that you're trying to meet, on the sort of the components that make up that service, both the digital bits and the non-digital bits. And also it helps both parties, I think, start to become aware as you're talking through this stuff around what the opportunities might actually be, for whether it's about saving money, making things more efficient, or improving the user experience. The other time when this is quite useful to do is at the beginning of a program of work. So let's say, you've just managed to get the business case signed off for a big digital transformation program across the whole of your council, and you need to decide who you're going to work with first, where you're going to start, and in what order you're going to tackle all the other services. So one way that I've done this in the past is to run through this process with sort of every head of service in the council, and then to analyse all of the results, and then we can figure out which ones are going to be the good ones to tackle and in what order. So, part of this is assessing, just how challenging it's going to be to sort of do the digital transformation and the service design work. So it might well be that if we're just starting out, then starting with some of the slightly less challenging services might be a good place to start, even if the actual opportunities for outputs at the other end aren't so great. At least it allows us to start sort of assessing things on that kind of basis. So the template looks a little bit like that. That's just a screenshot of it. I'll be loading it up properly in just a moment. But there's a link in the slides, and there's a link from the blog post as well to the Google Doc version of that. And then you can sort of download that into Word if that's what you like. It's quite... the template is quite emoji heavy with the ticks and the crosses and things. That's just because I think it's nice and it looks pretty. Depending on how outdated your version of Word is, though, that they may not work brilliantly. So I will just warn you about that. You might end up having to search the windings or whatever it might be for the ticks and the crosses if it doesn't quite sort of work for you. So that's basically running through the slides. So it's probably a good idea now to have a look at the actual sort of template. So if you just give me a minute, I will bring that up for you, and you'll be able to see the whole thing. So would anybody like, before we get started with this, does anybody just want to shout out, I don't know, the name of a relatively easy service, perhaps, that we could just sort of do this on as an example? and one that we can sort of make up some answers to. Does anybody want to suggest something?
Fly tipping.
Fly tipping, marvelous. Who was that said that?
Anthony.
Anthony, you're a good man. Thank you for doing that. That's absolutely great. So let's ping over to here. Can we all see that okay? So this is in effect the template for service discovery. What I might just do is make a copy of it, so I'm not editing the main template. And here it is. So we said we were going to do fly tipping in here, didn't we? Fantastic. So fly tipping. So somebody other than Anthony, do you want to shout out? What would we say the objectives of the service are? So this is where, you know, this is like the high end kind of like epic, the real user need that we're kind of meeting here. What is the point of the fly tipping service? Does somebody want to yell that out? I will pick on somebody if no volunteers are forthcoming. Just to
keeping the streets clear and attractive.
Keeping the streets clear and attractive. Fantastic. And shall we say, so by, shall we say, allowing the public to report instances.
I would say as well, enforcing, so any evidence of fly tippers is showing the members of the public what we do, like fines and prosecution.
Isn't it also about prevention in the first place, though?
Yeah. Quite possibly, yes. You're absolutely right. But let's not complicate matters for my example. So along with following up with, what was that good word? Enforcement, that was it, wasn't it? Enforcement for naughty people. Okay, fine. You may need to work with some of the wording on this. Fantastic. So we've now got the next bit of the template then is just thinking about what elements and what components kind of make up the service. You know, what kind of a service is this? What are the various bits that we might want to have in there? So I listed 8 of the most common kind of components or capabilities here for a digital service. So we can just go through and delete the ticks and the crosses as we need to. So is there any registrations involved in this service, would we say? Does somebody just want to shout out a yes or a no as we're going through this? Is registrations a core part of this service?
No.
No? A few people shaking their heads, I agree. Applications, is anybody applying for anything here?
No.
I don't think they are they? Do we need to take payments?
No.
No, we do not. Is there a need for a helpline style service?
What about fining though, Dave?
Fining, possibly, yes. But not on this occasion. So let's leave it. But no, I do take the point. Potentially, yes. Helpline, there might be a helpline instant where, you know, whilst the main service we want is delivery, we might want people to phone up. Do people need to make appointments? Not really, do they, on this one? Oh, here's the big one, reporting. Yep. Yeah, that's what all this is about. And I've just done the wrong thing. There we go. So we'll keep that. I don't think anybody's ordering, but I think there is an element here of informing, isn't there? You know, that's maybe that education piece or something along those lines, but also informing about the work the council's done that anybody else has spoken about.
That's all in government as well.
What's that, sorry?
They have to inform central government all the fly tipping statistics of the following. I can't remember what the company's, what element it is again. Is it data? I can't remember what they're called, but there is some reports that have to go to the central government based around the types of fly tippings, the size of fly tippings, etc., etc.
Absolutely. Good. So I'll put that in there as sort of as an other in there. So my typing is appalling. I do apologise. So it's central gov. Is there anything else in there that wasn't in that list of 8 that we think might be sort of an important part of this service, or is that broadly covers it quite possibly? So what we then look at is what are the channels that are currently being used by that service. So I would imagine in most cases, there's always probably going to be a bit of online, even if it's just like a simple web form that just spits a PDF out via email to the contact centre so they can type it into some other system. So it's likely that there's going to be an online element. It's possible that people will report fly tipping face to face. If somebody was to come into the reception and do that, we'd probably listen to them, wouldn't we, and make some notes. Is paper used in this? I don't think we would probably ask people to fill in a paper form to report this kind of thing. But obviously, the telephone is going to be sort of a fairly major element of this. So we then have a look at the next one is looking at sort of service users and who are the people that are going to be regularly using this. And this is also where we'd include some stats, in terms of the numbers of people that are actually sort of involved here. So for residents, I think that's a definite yes, isn't there? What do folk think about businesses? Do they report fly tipping much? We've got a few nods there. Yeah, businesses can report it, particularly, I guess, if it's somewhere near their premises or blocking their way in some other way. Politicians, councillors, often very interested in fly tipping, particularly when it's on their patch and stuff like that. How about professionals? So when we talk about professionals, in an example like, I don't know, like the planning service or something, then obviously there's architects and there's, developers and all that kind of stuff. Are professionals particularly involved in fly tipping, would we think?
I'd say yes. I mean, we use a fly tipping form, which is used by members of the public and our internal staff to report fly tipping, because we display reports of fly tipping on the map, so it's not duplicate reports.
Okie dokie. So some professionals might be in there as well. And again, we can put in here now. Does anybody know? Has anybody done fly tipping recently? What the rough sort of order of magnitude numbers might be? In terms of how many residents report fly tipping and that kind of thing. Are we talking hundreds a month?
Yeah,
Pretty much,
sometimes.
Yeah.
We get around probably about 350 a month.
Goodness.
I can confirm in Brent we're into the thousands a month.
My God, Brent sounds disgusting. But no, all joking aside, obviously, large metropolitan areas, you're probably going to have a fair few more. So maybe 300 odd from residents, fewer from businesses, I would guess. So I don't know what we put in there, maybe 50. Politicians, there might not be that many, but when they come, they're going to be quite high profile, aren't they? So, however many there might be. And maybe the professionals, when we've got our own people out and about and they're spotting these things, they might be sort of raising them as well. So maybe there's going to be maybe another, I don't know, 75, whatever it might be. And again, we've got another box there. So if there's anything we've not mentioned here, any other particularly strong sort of user groups for a particular area, then we can always pop them in there. And oh, fair enough, Richard, maybe I've undercooked the politicians' numbers there. Let's put a couple of zeros on that, which hopefully makes it a bit more sort of realistic on there.
They
so there we
have
go.
to put farmers in the chat as well, because they get a lot of gateways dumps, don't they, and stuff like that.
Okie dokie. So we'll put farmers down, and that's right. I suppose technically they could be considered to be like a local business or even a local professional, but actually sometimes maybe they are their own sort of group of people that's worth sort of pulling out separately because they've got their own sort of circumstances and that kind of thing. So maybe, yeah, absolutely, we can sort of list those there. So then the next stage, and this is the last bit, as I say, it's a pretty quick dash through a service. This is looking at the analysis, which is just on a simple sort of RAG kind of rating. So service user benefits. So what we mean here is that what are the opportunities here that if we were to digitally transform and do some service design on this service, what would be the benefit to the service user? So the person reporting the fly tipping and the people whose lives are being negatively affected by it. Well, this depends, of course. We need to think about the context that we're working in. At the moment, for instance, if the process was pretty poor online, maybe you can report it online, but you never get any notifications or follow-up or anything like that. Then maybe the actual sort of benefit to the service user isn't that great. So it might well be that by doing a good job on this, actually, there's a big green thing here that we can actually make some real benefit by doing it. For the organization, what are the opportunities here in terms of making, first of all, there's things like sort of customer satisfaction with the way that we're dealing with these things. So that might be a great opportunity. Currying favor with those politicians that are always, and the farming community that are always complaining about these things. there's probably some opportunities there. And there may be even some ways in which actually this could negatively impact the council. You know, if we make it so easy for people to report fly tipping, maybe we're going to get inundated with that kind of stuff. And maybe that would make us slightly wary about this. You can imagine service managers sometimes feeling that way about it, even if it's not a great reason not to be doing something. But overall, I reckon, I don't know what you folk think, but that's probably a green for the organisation benefit one. And then the third one is a really important one, which doesn't always get considered, I don't think, when we're thinking about which services we should be prioritising for digital transformation, which is just how hard is it going to be to actually do this thing? And there's loads of different factors that we can sort of bear in mind. And sometimes, you know, as doing part of this thing, you might want to note down what some of those things are. It could well be, you know, that the people that you're working with in the service, perhaps they're a little averse to change and they're not too keen on it. Perhaps there's complications around the technology with back office systems and all that kind of stuff that's going to make it really, really difficult to do. Maybe fly tipping, as an example, is a really, really hot political potato in your patch and in your area. And so actually it's something you just wouldn't want to touch as being the first thing that you're going to do, because for whatever reason, politically, it's just too much of a risk. So, you know, how hard is it going to be to actually do this thing? Now, I don't know, has anyone done fly tipping recently for a digital transformation? How difficult would you say, what's the change complexity around this one? I'm erring towards it's probably more on the simple side, but what do folk think?
We've just recently changed our fly tipping process, and I've got to say it's quite a complicated process because of the amount of different departments and within the council that it sits with. You've got the enforcement side, which is one bit, and then the clear up side, which is another bit, and the customer services bit, which is taking the initial information and passing that along. So and changing things like how people could report it. So you've got the mapping the GIS and technology and things like that. So for us personally, I found it quite complex, and changing some of the behaviours and habits that was historic to get it to a point where we felt it improved it.
Interesting. That's your experience. No, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Northumberland's
what do others
experience
think?
as well. Yeah, that was the experience we had at Northumberland. You think it's a straightforward service that only impacts on one business area, but you've got the environmental protection side of it as well. If you're talking hazardous fly tips, you've got housing as well. If you're talking it's fly tips within a council estate, it's in the land registry are involved, because if it's private land, it's nothing to do with us, but we still get the reports. But then you've also got, which I think I put my hand up earlier because we were talking about the way that it's reported. Quite often the fly tips aren't even reported. They are just found by our staff when doing their normal cleansing routes and have to be recorded as well. So you have to consider that there's the ability to take into account that the process comes from a customer, but sometimes the process actually isn't triggered off by a customer. It's triggered off just by the department physically coming across that fly tip themselves. So it becomes a quite complex process quite quickly. Unfortunately,
it does, doesn't it? And you know, isn't this really useful sort of information or sort of background to have before thinking about it? Because you know, you could well imagine, you know, folk just sort of flying into this without considering those. So what I'm going to do is, this may anger you both, but I'm going to stick this down as an amber, I think, because you know, while there are hidden complexities there, it's not social care. So we won't give it. It's
also the technological changes as well. I was just about to say, getting all the guys, the crews, several crews using iPads and picking them up instead of paper, but it's the same across the board with all of these types of
That's true. There's always going to be that element of cultural change, isn't there? That's going to take people by surprise. Fab, great. So that's good. So we've just run through that, and as you can see, you know, it doesn't take that long. And in fact, if we were talking to people who actually were running this service, it could be even quicker, although they might obviously give us some more detail as well. What you'll find is that just by running through a quick conversation along those lines, what you end up with is a lovely little sort of quick dashboard around, you know, exactly what it is that we're tackling here. You know, you can use the form and hack it about a bit however you want, maybe to add some detail. So, you know, if you want to, as I said, the key one is it maybe describing why you've given those RAG ratings in the analysis section and leave some notes on that. But you can see why, I think, both in terms of if you're just dealing with one service and just finding out about it at the beginning, it's a really useful way to kick off that discussion, and then to be able to then sort of share that information with your team around, you know, this is what we're taking on here, or here's some of the things we need to be thinking about. But equally, doing that other thing of the upfront, you're just starting a digital program. Let's do like loads of these with loads of different services. And then it gives you something that you can easily sort of flick through and decide perhaps where the best place to start is once you've done that analysis, and how you might prioritize all the services for the following, few years of your digital program. And these are quite nice as well. The other way that I found these to work really nicely is when you're reporting upwards as well. So, people, senior managers and leaders in organizations, they do love a thing that's on one page, if you can get it to that point, and it's fairly sort of bright and simple. So they can actually understand, that this isn't just putting a form on the website and, just hoping that it's going to work, that actually there are complexities and other things going on behind the scenes, all of which that need to be considered, which they might not have done before. So I think it's a really useful way of doing that as well. So I will stop sharing that screen there and just invite, just before we finish up, what do folks think? How are you approaching these kind of conversations at the moment? And, are you already kind of doing this? Or is this something that maybe would be quite a useful thing to make as part of your approach? Jez, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I'm struggling with my unmuting via a remote keyboard. I'm trying to be too clever. I think it's a really useful framework. We do something perhaps a little bit more complex than this, but I like the approach. But the other thing I was going to say to it is that we've discovered is that the other thing to take account of is how ready is this service to make this transformation, because with all other priorities and things, if they can't give the resources and the commitment to put into it, sometimes it's better just kicking them 6 months down the line until they're in a better place to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So organisation readiness, service readiness is a really key part of that as well. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Jez. Okay, Helen, what are your thoughts?
It's Helen, me.
Yes.
I thought it was really good because as one of the, just sort of starting out as a business analyst, you just, how do you start those conversations? So I think it's a good talk and a point, a good kind of process to talk around, and a good framework to kind of get those conversations going. But yeah, I agree that has the stakeholder or the services got the time to sit, and then they just expect, I think what we're having at Northumberland is sort of trying to develop the culture of the user first, and looking at user needs rather than solutionizing. So that's kind of where we're at the moment with that, sort of having those conversations. So yeah, I think I'll definitely use it and give it a go. Definitely.
Oh, that's great. How are you finding the response you're getting then as you're trying to go in on meeting user needs? How does that tend to go down? Are you finding?
It's sometimes, yeah, I mean, I think they appreciate it. I have used the local digital declaration to kind of start those conversations off, and to educate people, I think, and what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, it has been quite difficult sometimes. So it's starting off with the sort of process map, asking those questions. But I think it's just, building up the experience of how to do it and learning from others, really. So it's great to be here and see how everyone else is doing it. So yeah, thanks very much for putting this on. It's been good. Yeah.
Helen, I'm always willing to accept praise. So thank you for that feedback. And I think you're right. And I think the other really interesting thing about introducing the user needs thing is that quite often service managers will be aghast at the thought that they don't already meet their users' needs, or that their service isn't already designed around that. And it's so sometimes there's quite a difficult thing there, isn't there? About a thing that comes up a lot is when people are in meetings and you all agree and you're all using the same words, but then you leave the meeting and you're thinking, I don't think we were all talking about the same thing there. And, and it's the worst feeling in the world, isn't it? And that often happens, I think, when, people are saying, but, of course we meet our service users' needs. Of course, this is designed around what our users want. Why else would we be doing it? And yet, of course, so often it really doesn't. And having to unpick that can be quite a painful process.
Yeah, it certainly is. Trying to unpick that is it's challenging.
I can imagine. Amy, I've heard a fair bit about the exciting stuff you're doing in Tewkesbury, particularly like with your low code stuff and all of that kind of thing. How have you managed to, how does it start in terms of talking to service managers about transforming their services? Does it always start off as a positive conversation?
Yeah, most of the time it does. We had a similar experience as someone else on the call, where we were trying to move from our previous platform to our new platform, and it was all a bit of a rush, and we process mapped it and we did change the services, but now we've got a bit more breathing space and a bit more time. We're sort of going about it a bit differently and trying to introduce paperwork like this, where we sort of sit and go through and really think about the services. But yeah, we are quite positively received when we do go to services. We sort of go in, and the joy is that we now do have low code and we've got brilliant developers that can build. So we sort of ask them to bring their wish list to us. How would they like their service to run? And then we sort of then ask questions about that and about from a customer point of view. And we try to get someone from customer services in if it's a front facing service. So we sort of look at it from all the different angles. But having some really nice, clear one sheet paperwork is a really good idea. And it is something that we're now looking at trying to introduce. So we've got a consistent approach with all services, rather than lengthy meeting minutes with bullet points here and there, which will then try and pull them out of. So that's sort of the next stage that we're trying to move to now.
Awesome. That is absolutely great. Sarah, how about you? What's your experience of these sort of early conversations with services?
We work very closely. I work in the access service team, but we work quite closely with the transformation team. We've got quite a good relationship with them, who they initially go into the services that we're working with to improve some of the ways that we collecting the information. I think that's really helped, and they're quite clear. They understand how we work and building and design the form. So I think once they go into service, and the documentation that they pass back is very similar to this, and the process maps, it is quite similar to the one document. So yeah, it works. It would be really useful to probably move it on a bit like that you've just said, and just probably, from my point of view, is do that as well to see if it meets, and we've both got the same understanding of what we're going to be working on. So yeah, I definitely will be using that. Thank you.
Cool. Well, that's delightful to hear. We've got about 4 minutes to go. Did anybody want to mention anything else that they haven't had a chance to, whether it's about service discovery or baked goods or anything else? Richard?
David, there's this question about audience, I guess, because some of the times I found that when you speak to the service manager, in reality, they have no idea what happens in their service.
Yes. And
so generally speaking, when I'm trying to kind of work out what's happening in a service, you kind of look for someone who's got like administrator or technical officer or words to that effect. So I wonder what your experience around that was, and who are the right people to have in these meetings, not just what to discuss with them.
Yeah, I think the answer is, as always, is it kind of depends, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, sometimes we've all met sort of service managers who are, shall we say, strategic in their approach, and perhaps aren't quite so sort of down with all the operational detail. But actually, sometimes talking to those people can be really helpful, just to get to understand what their what the things are that are keeping them awake at night, and what their views are. And also, of course, it can be a really interesting thing to be able to feed back to them sometimes. Once you found out what the truth is on the ground, and being able to feed that back to them could be quite an interesting experience. But yeah, so my view on that is, and I have run into that. I mean, the alternative is also true, of course. Sometimes you meet service managers that absolutely are all over the detail, and they know all of that stuff, in which case that's absolutely brilliant. I think it's kind of you keep going. I think you start at a reasonably high level, and then you just keep moving down until you get to the point where you've got the information that you need. And it might well be that whether it's using this template or some other approach, that actually you start a new one each time you're talking to somebody new at the various levels, and you can start to build up a picture of around how people think things really work. How people think things work, how they actually work in reality, and at what point in the organizational tree does that sort of disconnect start to emerge. I think it can be quite useful, and I think that's certainly one of the areas where in the past taking, this kind of view that, digital change is more than about just, switching out the web forms or, doing something with the iPads, that actually it's about that kind of end-to-end service design and introducing this stuff, being able to start talking about some of these disconnects and these idiosyncrasies or whatever can be a really good way of starting to introduce the fact that this is about more than just the technology. This is about fully understanding our services. But to that point, I can remember working with one relatively small council where we were replacing the payroll system, and it became very clear that nobody in payroll actually understood how payroll worked. They knew what buttons they pressed in what order, but they didn't really have a clue what those buttons actually did. And so, in that case, we actually had to go and find somebody external to the organisation to come and explain to us exactly how this stuff works, which was a mildly terrifying place to be, but, quite helpful from an organisation design perspective in the future. But no, that is a good point and well raised. So we're hitting 12 o'clock. I can hear from here Jez's tummy rumbling, so he's desperate to go and get in that queue down at Greg. So we'll let him do that. Thanks ever so much to everybody for turning up. Sorry we spent so much time talking about pasties and so little about service design, but hopefully it was fun nonetheless, and gave you some ideas for future lunches. Like I say, I will be pinging an email out to you all with a copy of the recording and the slides and the template and everything else that you might need. If you've got any more praise you'd like to send me, then please do by email or any other means. If you've got some more critical feedback, feel free to keep that to yourselves. And if you have any ideas of things that you'd really like to know a bit more about in this sort of format, then or things that your team could really do with being having a talk through about some stuff, then just let me know, because I haven't got another one of these planned just yet. So if anybody's got any ideas for those, do let me know. And have a lovely rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Goodbye.